Week 6 is fast approaching, and we've got 4 teams on bye weeks for Chiefs, the Rams, the Dolphins, and the Vikings. And I've got the 13 best waiver wire pickups that you should be picking right now. Let's get into it. We're going to start with the quarterback position. We've got Daniel Jones, who's just 9% rostered on Yahoo leagues right now. This is a guy who's been a top 12 quarterback in 3 of the last 4 games, including this week just gone, without Malik Neighbors, without Devin Singletary out there. 7th in completion rate over the last 3 games, 10th in passing yards per game, and Daniel Jones is looking all right. And the thing is, he's not even rushing that much. If he adds a little bit more rushing work into his game, then Daniel Jones can really go from fringe QB1 to solid QB1. The next few games are against the Bengals, Eagles, Steelers, and Commanders. Plenty of opportunities in those for lots of fantasy points. We're going to move on to the next player in a minute, but first, if this is your first time finding us here in the Fantasy Sanctuary, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We do Dynasty, DFS, Redraft, and Best Ball all year round. Bo Nix, 10% rostered. I know Bo Nix is definitely the kind of quarterback who you probably don't want to pick up and be reliant on for a period of time. But if you need a single week or just a couple of weeks cover, the Bo Nix, he's averaging 19.7 rushing yards per game. He also has 2 rushing touchdowns. He's been a top 12 performer in 2 of his last 3 games. Like, that's pretty good for a quarterback in an offense that we don't really think a lot of. If he connected with Troy Franklin on that long touchdown bomb this week just gone, that would have been an even bigger game for Bo Nix, and he could have been really hot property this week. So I'm fine taking a shot on Bo Nix. Maybe you stash him. Maybe you just need to get through 1 week. But either way, I think that Bo Nix is somebody out there who's worth rostering. Got games coming up against the Chargers, Saints, and Panthers. Moving to the running back position, and it is the man of the moment, Tank Bigsby, 25% rostered on Yahoo leagues. He looks so explosive, particularly when you compare him to Travis Etienne. Look at what Bigsby's done. Bigsby has over 70 scrimmage yards in 3 of 4 games this year. Meanwhile, Etienne's been over 60 total scrimmage yards once. Etienne is in a contract year. He needs a good year, and he's just not putting it out there. According to Doug Peterson, Etienne's got a shoulder injury that he's dealing with, but I don't think it matters. I think the Jags want to go with the guy who they drafted. Doug Peterson didn't draft Travis Etienne. Etienne was there when he got there, and right now, for job security, showing that he can develop a young player is probably more important than a running back who, regardless, they're not going to want to pay at the end of this season. The next few games for the Jags, they've got the Bears, who they aren't an easy team to pass on, but they are an easy team to run on. So it could be Tank Bigsby has another big game straight away. Then it's the Patriots and the Packers. So plenty of opportunity coming up. Rico Dowdle, 56% rostered. I know most of you are going to say Rico Dowdle's rostered in my league anyway, but just go and check. 56% of Yahoo leagues. That's 44% where he's not. He's slowly taking over the RB1 role from Zeke Elliott. Zeke is just toast. He's had single-digit rushing opportunities over the last 3 games, less than 20 yards. The Cowboys, they realize it. It was just sentimentality, the whole thing. And meanwhile, Dowdle, he seems to be growing into this role. He's been over 13 yards per target in his last 2 games. He's rushed for over 4 yards per carry in each of the last 4 games. Last night against the Steelers, he had a season-high 64% opportunity share. He is becoming the lead guy in that backfield, and he's the one that you want. Week 6, playing against the Lions, which is not an easy game, but Kenneth Walker just went out there and had a really good game against them. So perhaps the Lions defense isn't quite as tough as we thought. Then there's a bye week and then the Niners. So not the easiest player to go out and spend huge amounts of money on, but I really believe Rico Dowdle can be a very good running back down the stretch. Ty Chandler, he's yet to impress this year, but Aaron Jones is going to get an MRI, which means that there is going to be a point where Ty Chandler could end up being the RB1 in this backfield. Last year, when Alexander Mattison was really struggling for the Vikings, it was Ty Chandler who came in and really gave him some juice. He had 4 top 36 finishes out of 5 2023 games where he had 13 or more touches. Yes, it's not pretty the way that he ran against the Jets, but the Jets defense is pretty good. So perhaps once the Vikings get back, if Aaron Jones is going to miss some time, then Ty Chandler can rediscover some form with a game plan that's built a bit more around him. Tyrone Tracy, 23% rostered, and Tyrone Tracy is probably the player that you should be bidding the most for this week. He had 20 touches with Devin Singletary missing out. Now, I don't think Devin Singletary is going anywhere anytime too soon, because Devin Singletary is Brian Dable's guy from when they were together in Buffalo. But Tyrone Tracy has such an exciting profile. He's a converted wide receiver to running back in college. And once he converted from wide receiver to running back, that's where things kind of really got going for Tracy. He had 8.1 yards per rush attempt in 2022, 6.3 in 2023, ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. And where this all comes down to is the fact that Tyrone Tracy gets to play the awful Bengals rushing defense next week. Then it's the Eagles and then the Steelers. I really think that by the time we get to week 10, week 11, Tyrone Tracy is going to be the clear RB1 in this backfield in New York. Jalen Wright, 20% rostered. This is a more tricky one because the Dolphins, they're going into their bye week. You know that Strachan is dealing with a concussion, but most players tend to be able to clear a concussion protocol within that spell that a bye week's going to give. But the thing is, Strachan hasn't been good this year. Last year, he had 7.8 yards per carry. Nobody saw the regression hitting him as hard as it has done this year. He ranks 44th among 50 running backs with 25 plus attempts with 3.1 yards per carry. Meanwhile, you look at what Jalen Wright did yesterday. Jalen Wright looked fast. He was playing really well. And I think that he has loads of upside. We've already seen that Jeff Wilson is inactive on game days when everyone's healthy. Raheem Mostert is 32 years old and has already missed several games. So if the Dolphins are looking for a player to go out there and take more rush attempts, it makes sense that it could be Jalen Wright. And coming out of the Dolphins bye week, they get the Indianapolis Colts and then the Arizona Cardinals. Those are both matchups that we can lean into. Moving over to the wide receiver position, and we have got Josh Downs. Again, this might be a player that's a little trickier in some leagues to get hold of. 40% rostered currently. And there'll be people out there who are like, I only want Josh Downs if I've got Joe Flacco throwing him the ball. But Anthony Richardson, just before his shoulder injury, he looked quite good. He seemed to be settling into a rhythm. Josh Downs, he's got the slot role completely locked down for the Colts. 21 targets in the last 2 games, 8th most of the wide receiver position, been a top 15 wide receiver in back-to-back games. Josh Downs looked really good last year before the injury that he picked up in week 12, and then he struggled through that. He's coming off a high ankle sprain that he suffered in training camp, and yeah, it's taken a little while for him to get going. But this is a guy who he just looks really reliable, looks like he can separate well, and I want Josh Downs in every single league. Jalen Tolbert, 7% rostered. All offseason, Cowboys beat reporters, anyone connected to the team, they told us Jalen Tolbert's taken a step, that Dak Prescott really trusts him. And Dak Prescott doesn't really have much choice at this point because there's CeeDee Lamb and there's Jalen Tolbert. And then you've got Brandon Cooks on injured reserve. So what's he going to do? He's going to throw to Jalen Tolbert. Last night when the game was on the line against the Steelers, he went to Jalen Tolbert. Tolbert's averaged 6.7 targets per game for the last 4 games. And I think that you're looking at a player who is ascending to an okay level. He's never going to be great, but through these bye weeks, we're going to have to make some uncomfortable starts. The Cowboys, they play the Lions next week. We've seen the Lions, but they're struggling against wide receivers at times this year, so I don't mind starting Jalen Tolbert. We've made it 8 minutes into this video. I know you must be enjoying it and find it useful if you've got this far. So hit the subscribe button because I'm here every week with your waiver video. Moving on, Jordan Whittington. Jordan Whittington is just, he's exciting when you watch him play. This is a really fun player. 18 targets for 13 catches, 151 receiving yards over the last 2 weeks, 2.19 yards per route run over those games. And yes, you are going to have to stash Jordan Whittington across the bye week because the Rams, they now have the bye, but then they face Raiders, which could be a really good opportunity for him. Sean McVay came out on Monday and he said that Cooper Kupp is hoping to be back after the bye week, but he wasn't very committal. There's still no update on Puka Nacua. The last we heard, it could be up to another month before Puka Nacua is back on the field. So Jordan Whittington has a really big chance to just establish himself, at the very worst, as wide receiver 3 on this team. And we know the Rams are going to play in 3 wide receiver sets more often than any other team if they've got Nacua and Cooper Kupp out there. Rashod Bateman. Okay, look, yes, you can see the jerseys behind me. You know I'm a biased Ravens fan, but listen to me, because there's one key reason why you want to grab Rashod Bateman if you're struggling for depth this week. Next week, The Ravens play the Commanders in what is going to be one of the most fantasy-friendly games of the year. The Commanders secondary, they can't stop anyone. The Ravens secondary ranked 23rd in EPA, and that's going to keep both offenses passing the ball, even though both offenses probably want to lean into the run quite a bit. Rashod Bateman is coming off his best fantasy score since week 2 of the 2022 season. 8 targets. Again, that's the most that Bateman's seen since his rookie year. Things seem to be slowly trending up for Rashod Bateman. It's always going to be difficult to predict what the Ravens offense is going to do week to week. But if you need somebody for 1 week and 1 week only, Rashod Bateman, his matchup looks really good next week because the Commanders particularly struggle out on the perimeter, which is where Bateman's been making some plays. Moving to the tight end position to round us out, Tucker Kraft, and oh my god, I cannot tell you how good it feels to be heavily exposed to Tucker Kraft in best ball right now. He is 62% rostered, so again, this is one of those plays that a lot of you probably won't be able to get, but go and check just in case. This is the guy who is emerging as the late round tight end of 2024. He's a back-to-back tight end 1 overall finishes, 17 plus points in both of them. And the simple fact is, Tucker Kraft is just a better player than Luke Musgrave. Go back to last season when Luke Musgrave got injured and all of a sudden Tucker Kraft was pushed into a feature role. He absolutely outperformed Luke Musgrave and what he did across the first half of the season in virtually every metric. If it hadn't been for the torn pec, I think that Tucker Kraft would have had a lot more off-season hype. But right now he looks so good, and after this game week, he goes up to the Cardinals, the Texans, and the Jags. Plenty of points on offer on those ones. And then let's round it out with Tyler Conklin, who is 30% rostered. We've got the Bills, the Steelers, and New England up on tap. He's had 15 catches in his last 3 games. They played Buffalo, like I said, in week 6. They've allowed the 12th most fantasy points to tight end position. And Conklin, he's just out there nearly all the time. He's averaging an 89% slap rate. He seems to have Aaron Rodgers' trust. We know how much of a big deal that is. If you've got Aaron Rodgers' trust, then he's going to go to you when he needs to. Conklin, look, it's not a huge upside swing, but it's just solid and reliable. And if you've been somebody who's been starting Mark Andrews for the last few weeks, you'd probably quite like some solid and reliable right now. Those are your week 6 waivers. We are going to be back next week with more. We'll be back on Thursday with our week 6 preview. I'll be doing some DFS content. We've got Tyler doing the Underdog Battle Royale content. And of course, Rich will be bringing you Dynasty Buys and Sells on Wednesday. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and we will be back very soon.